Mondays are always better after West Ham win over the weekend. I cannot wait to see Scamacca against Southampton. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing us play against Anderlecht and against Southampton in general. But Scamacca, I just can't get enough of him right now. 18 months we've had to wait for a striker, for that replacement for Sebastian Haller. Over 50 strikers we have signed under David Gold and David Sullivan. And he's finally here, and boy, he's been worth the wait. I've just got this ridiculously sky-high confidence that when Scamacca starts, he's going to score a goal in that game, essentially. And if he doesn't score, it's because we've not given him enough chances. But you feed the goat, he will score, as they say. Anyway, this video is not about Scamacca. I'll shut up about him eventually, but for now, what a player. Anyway, not Scamacca. It's not even about the game yesterday. In fact, I'm going back to the end of last week because there was some potentially big news for West Ham come out, which was that West Ham can buy the stadium naming rights for $4 million. The LLDC addressed the London Assembly on Thursday, and within there, that's where they stated that West Ham can purchase the stadium naming rights for $4 million. So obviously, by the time this hit our headlines as West Ham fans, that would be Friday, and by then we're all looking forward to the Fulham game. Over the weekend, we're keeping our eye on the Premier League action on Saturday. Sunday, it's all about the Fulham game as well. But this is potentially big news, and I wanted to discuss it because I say I've done a little bit of research. Keith Wyness, who was chief executive at Aston Villa, Everton, Aberdeen, he's spoken about it before in the past, as has Kieran Maguire. He's spoken about it when he did our Q&A a couple of months ago. He spoke about the naming rights of stadiums, and actually why it's not a big deal as you might assume. And I'll be honest with you, Wyness has convinced me, actually. So we're going to discuss this information side of it, and I'll give my opinion as well. But the news side of it, well, we know West Ham moved into that stadium in 2016, and it's always been the responsibility of the LLDC to get their own stadium sponsored, for them to sell the stadium rights. And the board has always stated that they're willing to help them find somebody. There's been a couple of big companies linked in the past, but whether they actually were interested or it was just speculation, we will never know. But what we do know, fact, nobody's had it. It's been called the London Stadium since 2016. So over 6 years we've been playing there now. No stadium sponsor. And LLDC are under pressure. 31 million in losses last year. So they need to reduce expenditure and increase income. And the stadium naming rights is something that is worth millions. They're struggling. Well, I say struggling. They've struggled. They haven't been able to sell it for whatever reason. And on Thursday, well, they've stated their terms very publicly now to West Ham, which is $4 million, and you can have it. I also think it's a clever way. I think what LLDC have done here is quite clever, actually, because A, they make West Ham very aware. B, they make everybody, like myself and yourself, aware that West Ham can now purchase it. But what they've also done is almost put out a big, massive advert to any company out there saying, $4 million a year, you can name the London Stadium after your company, after your brand. So I think what they've done is taken out a huge advert to just worldwide companies. So there you go, $4 million, you can have the London Stadium naming rights. There you go. That's the price, and that's the price they're looking for from West Ham as well. Now, the reports off the back of this are that West Ham have no interest. West Ham don't want it. $4 million, no thank you. Our offer remains. We'll help you find somebody if you wish. But in terms of passing it on to us for $4 million, and then we, the club, try and sell it for $5-6 million, make a couple of million off it. No thank you. You can have it and you can do what you want with it. We're not interested. And I actually understand the club's stance on this as well. And when you look around the Premier League, there's not that many examples of Premier League clubs successfully selling their stadium naming rights. And when they have, the likes of Brighton and Manchester City, it's usually linked to the owner's other companies. So the owners own a company, they're using that company to sponsor the stadium naming rights of their football club, and then they can inject cash into their football club that way. That's why the Premier League panicked a little bit when Newcastle were brought over, and they brought in this new rule immediately, which was, well, owners can no longer sponsor the football clubs. Owners of that company and the football club can no longer sponsor each other. Now, they've relaxed this rule at the end of 2021. They relaxed that a little bit, which is, well, actually, they can do it, but it now needs to be approved by the Premier League, and it must be at what they consider to be market value. So it's tied Newcastle's hands a little bit, made it fair, I guess. And Manchester City have come under scrutiny for this, haven't they, with UEFA and financial fair play, because their sponsorship deal, the package, is worth $67.5 million a year. Now that covers the stadium naming rights, but it also covers the shirt sponsorship and everything else that the Etihad sponsor at Man City, but it's worth 67.5 million. Now that's one example. The other example of why it's a bit difficult, and we'll get on to this with what Winus has spoken about in the past, and this is why I think he's probably quite a good information point, if you like, on this, and why it perhaps won't work for West Ham, but it also could do. Now he basically said the best examples are Arsenal. Arsenal is the best example. Before that stadium was completed, they refused to rename the stadium. They got the deal done with Emirates, and it's just been called Emirates from day one. I know it's Emirates, you know it's the Emirates Stadium. And that deal was a 15-year deal initially, worth 100 million for the stadium and the shirt sponsor. 100 million for 15 years. Now, since the brand deal has been extended and increased, so on and so forth, but initially that's what it was called, and it'll be difficult to get away from the Emirates Stadium now. That's just what we know it as. You have a look at Brentford, actually Tottenham today is another good example, which was given by Winus a couple of years ago when Tottenham moved into their new stadium. What's the name of Spurs' new stadium? You don't know, do you? Because they didn't really name it. They've stayed away from naming their stadium. When they refer to their stadium on their website, they just call it this stadium. So we caught up with Antonio Conte at the stadium. They don't put the name of the stadium in their articles on their website. It's nowhere. It's completely unbranded so that they can sell the stadium naming rights. Reports today link Tottenham to Google. Google are supposedly interested in naming that stadium, obviously after Google, 1 billion. 1 billion is the price tag, what Spurs are looking for. And this is just good business by Daniel Levy. They've stayed away from naming their stadium at all because they need to get as much money as possible to cover the big expenses. But Google are being linked to Spurs' new stadium for 1 billion. Brentford have recently announced their stadium naming rights just last week. What was it called prior? That's right, the Brentford Community Stadium. That's what it was. What is it going forward? The G-Tech Community Stadium. So they've simply just taken Brentford out, put G-Tech in, but it's a very smooth transition because they haven't named it as something in the past, whether in regards to the location or in regards to the club or anything like that. They just put the word Brentford in there, and it made it so that they were open to brand deals going forward. So if a sponsorship did come along, we take Brentford out, we put the company in there, sorted. Now it's for the next 10 years, it's now called the G-Tech Community Stadium. Now the financials of that deal haven't been disclosed. We're going to have to wait for 18 months or so when the accounts come out. Someone a hell of a lot smarter than me will go through it, put up an article explaining how much it's worth to Brentford, where people like me come along and go, thank you very much, I'm going to have that information. And that's what I've done when listening and reading about what Winus has spoken about in regards to stadium naming rights. That's what we're going to discuss in just a second. But before we do that, this video is sponsored by the OneFootball app. Now, if you had the OneFootball app already, you'd already know this news because it came up on Friday. The OneFootball app is the best place to keep up to date with everything going on at your club, and not just your club. If you'd wish to get all the big headlines from around the Premier League or the latest news for the Europa Conference League, you can set the app up for that as well. Now, unlike the London Stadium, we here at Hammershaw have got our fantastic sponsors with the OneFootball. Hopefully they don't take the OneFootball Stadium. No, we can't be having that. We need to keep the OneFootball app right here on this channel. Now, you can download that app by clicking the link in the description of this video. Tailor it to your needs. Download it for free. Tailor it to your needs. Bish, bash, bosh. Then all you have to do is keep up with the latest at your club by using it every single day. Just like we do, just like I did on Friday, to find out the fact that essentially the LLDC wish to sell the stadium naming rights for 4 million. Now, on to what Winus has said in the past. Now, Winus was chief executive at Aston Villa, at Everton, at Aberdeen. And when he was at Villa and Everton, he couldn't sell the stadium naming rights for those grounds because of what they're known as. Everybody knows them as Villa Park and Goodison Park. Even if they got a new sponsor, take Aston Villa, Kazoo. That's your shirt sponsor right now. It is, isn't it? You always doubt yourself when you say something like that. It's Kazoo. Could you imagine they sponsored the stadium and they wanted it to be called Kazoo Park from now on? Nobody would call it that. We'd all just call it Villa Park. A bit like when Mike Ashley was at Newcastle and he changed it to Sports Direct Arena or whatever. Everybody just called it St James's Park. Nobody called it the Sports Direct. I don't even know what it was. Was it Arena? For some reason I think it was Arena, not Stadium. But nobody referred to it as that. We all still called it St James's Park, and that's the problem Villa and Everton had. Everton will get a new sponsor for their new stadium, but they can't rename Goodison Park and Villa Park. So the question is, can West Ham do that with the London Stadium, or will it forever be known as the London Stadium? But another problem when it comes into sponsorship like this, according to Winus, is that it's got to be long-term deals. Nobody's sponsoring a stadium for 1 year or 2 years or anything like that. It has to be long-term. So will West Ham find it easy to find a sponsor for the stadium? I don't think it's as straightforward as some people like to think. I'll be honest with you, as I used to like to think until I heard what Winus had said, and it triggered, a thought process essentially. I thought, well, actually, we now know it as the London Stadium. It's been known as the London Stadium for probably too long, and given the historic connection between the stadium and the Olympics, and I'm aware it was called Olympic Stadium then, and we've changed it to London Stadium, I'm unsure that it would get changed again that simple. But it's not just that, it's the kickback as well. As a fan base, would we accept if it was called, I'm just throwing it out there, the Betway Stadium? I don't think we would. Nobody would call it that. We would still just call it the London Stadium. So it's a very difficult thing. But as a company looking to sponsor that stadium, you can't be accepting that. You have to get it so that everybody refers to it as your company's stadium name going forward, like the Emirates, a bit like the G-Tech Stadium for Brentford. Because there's been no name previous, it was easy for them to rename it. Like I said, the Spurs Stadium, very, very clever by Tottenham, just refusing to name their stadium, referring to it as the stadium in every single bit of publication they do on their website, so that when Google do come along, it's a simple transition. Not so simple for West Ham, because it's now known as the London Stadium. You go into the mega store at West Ham, there's plenty of merch on there with London Stadium on it. All that would have to change. Would it? I'm not so sure. And obviously the club then have to pay $4 million, so they're going to have to sell it for $6 million more to make it worthwhile, to make a couple of million a year on it. It's a big ask, really. But also, is it in the club's best interest to help out the LLDC or to let them struggle? Now, this is where it ties into the future of West Ham a little bit, which is, as we know, from April onwards, Sullivan and Gold can sell their shares in West Ham and not have to have any profit handed over to the government as per the deal for the stadium leasing, that 10-year deal they've got. It comes to an end in April. So from April onwards, I think there's a fair expectancy that Daniel Kutinski may be looking to purchase at least one of their shares or more shares from each of them to expand his involvement in West Ham United. And given that they've just relaxed the rules, I said just, at the end of 2021, they've relaxed the rules over club ownerships, other companies sponsoring those football clubs, there is a way there that Kutinski that can then pump more money into West Ham if he wished. If he had a bigger stake, would he do it now? I don't know, possibly. I don't see why wouldn't he? He's got his fingers in many, many pies across Europe to then sponsor West Ham. It would be something that would surprise me, in all honesty. But there is part of me that would imagine he would want a greater stake in West Ham prior to doing that. And now we know the price, $4 million a year. Is it worth $4 million a year to a big company? I don't know. I haven't a Scooby. Winus didn't cover that. He just spoke about why Premier League clubs may struggle to get sponsors for their stadiums going forward. But certainly the London Stadium, I would imagine, is a bit more desirable than, like I said, Villa Park. It'd be easier to rename that one. However, should we go and try and get a new naming rights sponsor in the next couple of years, we'll be going head to head with Everton. Everton are in the process of building their stadium. They're going to want a naming rights partner on board from the day one, a bit like what Arsenal have done. We're then in competition with them. Like I said, this is where it comes in. But it's in West Ham's best interest, surely, that the LLDC struggle, that they are making big financial losses, 31 million last year. Should they continue to do that? And there's always been a suspicion that the end plan for West Ham is actually they almost drown and the LLDC just hand it to West Ham and say, here, you take the stadium, you have it for free, you take all the expenses that goes with it, it costs us 30 million a year to run, we can't afford it, you have it, you deal with it going forward. So why would, if that was the plan at West Ham, why would we then help them? Why would we give them $4 million a year and say, yeah, you have that, we'll sort the naming rights for you? Surely it's in the club's long-term interest that LLDC struggle and actually end up wanting to give the London Stadium away, or whatever it's called at this point, to the owners, to West Ham, to Daniel Kaczynski. So while it's big news, I don't think it's big news. Does that make sense? It's interesting. Okay, it's interesting news, but I don't think it's big news. And like I said at the very start, the reports are, off the back of it, the West Ham have got no interest in taking this 4 million rights on and then selling it themselves. They are happy to stand back, so you deal with it. We'll give you a hand if you need to. And it doesn't surprise me that that's their stance. And I don't think it'll change anytime soon. But like I said, I do think the LLDC have been a bit clever here. I do think they've just made a massive advert and said, there you go, anybody out there that wants to sponsor this stadium, that wants to name this stadium after their company, it's 4 million a year. That's the asking price. Get in touch if you fancy it. But someone that won't be getting in touch, I think, is West Ham United. They don't seem interested at all. So there you go. Big news. No, interesting news. Anyway, tomorrow we've got our Anderlecht preview. I'm really looking forward to it. And on Wednesday night, I've got like a pro David Moyes video. It's got nothing to do with tactics, don't worry. But it's a thought process I've had over the last week or so. I hinted about it in a couple of... I've spoken about it in a couple of videos. I'm just expanding on it on Wednesday. Anyway, I did reach out to Keith Winers to get him on to do a little bit of an interview with him in regards to the stadium naming rights. Unfortunately, couldn't be possible, but hopefully I'll get him on in the future during the World Cup or something, and he can... I guess you'd have a more informed, educated man speaking to you about his experiences rather than me telling you what I've read from Winus in regards to stadium naming rights. So yeah, there you go. Interesting news. I'm going to shut up now. I'm going to disappear. If you enjoyed this video, please do drop a like on it. Subscribe if you're new to Hamish Chat. And I'll catch you tomorrow with Gonzo for the Anderlecht preview. See you then.